live on both the AgCenter's Facebook page and our YouTube channel. So we're dual streaming today. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm Anna Rebeck, the social media strategist for the LSU AgCenter. And today we have three special guests with us. We have Dr. Glen Gentry, who's our feral swine specialist. We have Dr. Rodrigo Diaz, he's associate professor in the Department of Entomology. And we have Dr. Mike Kaller over in Renewable and Natural Resources. Thank y'all all for being here. This week is National Invasive Species Awareness Week, so we wanted to go live and discuss the research being done to help with assessing invasive impacts and to help with developing new detection techniques and research being done to help with management efforts. So invasive species cost Louisiana millions each year in damages. So today we're going to spotlight just a few of those invasives, including feral hogs, giant salvinia, Asian carp, and roseau cane scale. So feel free to ask questions as we go, guys. We have our experts here, and they're our researchers, and they're awesome. And we're actually going to start off with feral hogs with Dr. Gentry. So I'm going to hide Dr. Diaz and Dr. Kaller just for a minute. Let's see. There we go. So Dr. Gentry, what are y'all doing with feral hogs over here at the AgCenter? You know, why are they so bad for Louisiana?
Well, what we're doing right now is we're trying to develop a toxicant that we can use to put out and try to control feral hogs. And why they're a problem is because there's too many of them.
Okay.
Yeah, the reproductive rate on these things are outrageous. I think the last numbers I heard for wildlife and fisheries was a little over 1 million in the state, which has climbed to about 200,000-300,000 from when I started this work. And there's basically no way to control them. They don't have any enemies other than humans, and so the damage that they do to agricultural crops and commodities, which the AgCenter works to promote, is devastating to some of the folks. So we were tasked with the program to develop a toxicant to control these things, or attempt to control them.
So would you say we can eradicate feral hogs?
No, you can't eradicate feral hogs. There was some work that came out probably 20 years ago. There's a little island off the coast of South America. It's about a half-mile wide and a mile long, and it had feral hogs on it. They decided they were going to eradicate feral pigs. They did it, but it took them 30 years. So if you think about an island that's probably a mile square, and compare that to North America, we will never eradicate feral pigs. We just have to learn to control their populations.
Okay. So you think what y'all are doing might become a management tool for it?
Oh, it's just going to be another tool in the toolbox. It's going to have to go right along with hunting and trapping, and this is just another tool that will be used to try to control the pigs.
What is this bait you're working on?
The bait we're working on basically is a fish-based bait. I think you may have a picture of it. It's got sodium nitrite in it. Right now the bait's got about 5 grams, which will kill about a 75-pound pig. The good thing is we're feeding it to pigs, so they will eat more than one. So if you have a pig that's greater than 75 pounds, it's not an issue. And the reason that sodium nitrite is at the forefront of this, and we're not the only folks working on it, is because it's so environmentally friendly. In other words, it readily breaks down in the environment. It's not going to build up. It's not going to cause a pyramid effect like Timic will with scavengers eating a dead animal and it kills the scavengers and that sort of thing. But whenever you do work with that, because it doesn't break down so easy, it makes it very challenging to put it into a form that you can feed the pig. It maintains its potency in the pig, and then once pig succumbs, the potency is reduced greatly.
Okay. So if a pig eats it, will other animals, will there be like a pyramid effect to it?
No, there will not be. There will not be.
Okay. And I know, hunters have a concern about eating pigs that have been poisoned. Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, we eat sodium nitrite every day. At least those of us that eat sausage and bacon and all that. It's used as a preservative, and that's the bait you see there on the bottom right corner. And we have a pretty good tolerance for sodium nitrite. The FDA says that humans can consume up to 200 parts per million, which is the same thing as 200 milligrams per kilogram. In the work that we've done to kill a pig, it takes 188 milligrams per kilogram. So the dosage that we give the pig is less than what the FDA says we can safely consume as humans. So a hunter basically going out and shooting a pig, if the pig is up and moving, it's a non-issue. And there's been some work done. I think Jim McClure talked about pigs coming in and eating sodium nitrite. And the way it works is it does not allow the transport of oxygen in the blood, so they basically suffocate. And so they'll lay down because of a lack of oxygen and basically sleep if it's not a lethal dose. And then they'll get up and leave and go do their thing, and they'll come back to the baiting site again the next day. So it's going to be very environmentally friendly. That's
good to hear. How long have you been working on this, and
what kind of working on this? Probably 7 to 8 years.
Okay.
When they came to me and said we need to come up with a toxicant for feral pigs, I thought this was going to be relatively easy. I'm a reproductive physiologist by trade, so this started out of my wheelhouse. And we found out pretty quick that we were going to have to encapsulate, or thought we would have to encapsulate sodium nitrite to protect it until it's released in the pig. I was unsuccessful. I protected it so well that we could give pigs dosages of 5 times the lethal dose, and it didn't affect them. It just go right through them. So I contacted Dr. John Pullman in the Department of Chemistry at LSU, and he and his group helped us with what we were trying to do. And basically, we found out that if we shift the pH of the bait matrix to the alkaline side, so we're talking 7.5, maybe 8, the sodium nitrite doesn't convert to these other compounds, and it remains potent. So we don't have to encapsulate sodium nitrite. So that's the direction we're going now.
Okay. How long do you think? Like, what kind of process do y'all have going forward? How long would it be until it came out on the market? Like, what is that?
Well, probably I've been asked that a billion times over the last 8 years. We're finishing up pen trials now. So I'm guessing another couple of months, 3 months or so in pen trials. And then we will have to run a field trial. We'll have to get EPA approval, set up on the landscape, and run pen trials to show them the efficacy of the bait and the lack of impacts on non-target animals.
Okay.
And once that data set is put together and then sent to EPA, my understanding is they have about 18 months to review the package and make a determination one way or the other.
Okay.
Personally, I don't think it's going to take them 18 months. So to answer your question, we're probably looking at, on the outside, probably 2 years. If you figure it's going to take two and a half years, if they use all of their 18 months to get something to market.
Okay.
I don't think it'll take that long, but that's just the nature of the beast.
Now, I do have a question for you and Dr. Kaller, so I'll bring him back up on the screen here in a second once it starts. There we go. It's about the Kaput feral hog bait that was almost available in Texas, and then it got taken off the market. Why did it get taken off? Like, what's the difference between that and the one you're working on?
Well, I can take this one. Kaput has a lot of potential to impact non-target species. Kaput was developed, and Glenn, you can correct me if I'm misremembering, to control rats and mice in grain storage areas. And it's highly, highly effective. But Kaput is easily transmitted by runoff. And when it gets in the water, it affects a lot of non-target species, particularly fish. A lot of the fish that we like here, like brim and bass, are really sensitive to Kaput. So it was pulled back out of concern for non-target impacts. And that's why it's so important that Glenn's doing the work he's doing very carefully and cautiously, because we don't want to have a product that affects things unintentionally.
Sure, fair enough. And we have a good question from Lily, Glenn, if you saw it on the side there.
I saw it. If a hog eats several of these baits and is killed and harvested by a hunter within the next 24 to 40 hours, will the concentrated amount of sodium nitrite in the meat affect people? The answer to that is no. Because if a feral hog consumes a lethal dose of sodium nitrite, the hog is dead in 2.5 to 3 hours. So there is no There is no 24 to 48 hours later. If he receives a non-lethal dose and he gets up and walks off, it's a non-issue. Texas Parks and Wildlife did some work where they looked at pigs, and I told y'all earlier that the FDA says we can consume up to 200 parts per million of sodium nitrite in our food source. Well, when they did their work, they actually killed pigs with sodium nitrite, tested the meat, liver, eyes, and all that was under 100 parts per million. So it's well below what the FDA says people could consume. The only thing that was above the 200 parts per million was the stomach contents. So somebody would literally have to go out and scoop stomach contents and consume that to have issues.
Okay, that's pretty good. That do you have anything else to add on what you're doing?
Well, one other thing that I'd like to talk about, he mentioned the warfarin. There is another aspect that hadn't been discussed, and that's the human health concern.
Sure.
Warfarin, if you read the label of Kaput, it says it can take up to 5 days to kill a pig. So you have a pig walking around with sublethal doses of warfarin in its system. Mm-hmm. If that pig is killed by a hunter, going back to Lynn's question, there's going to be some warfarin in that meat. So then if you have hunters that are on Coumadin, which is a blood thinner that a lot of people are on, you could run into an issue of messing up the Coumadin level within the individual that consumed meat. So there is some concern along those lines.
Okay. And that's with the Kaput. That's not with yours.
That mine doesn't have that. No.
Okay.
Typically, I told y'all earlier that it converts real easy. It's really environmentally friendly. So when it is exposed to slightly acidic conditions, it converts to sodium and nitrous acid and sodium nitrite, which is much less toxic to other animals. So it's relatively inert once it converts.
That's good to hear. We have another question, if you want to take that one.
Let's see. What solution do you have for all the people who use wild hog as their main source of meat because they can't afford to go to the grocery store? What are they supposed to do when their main source of meat is completely killed off their area? Again, that's not going to happen. We would have to kill 750,000 pigs just to keep numbers where they are right now. Okay? And I like to equate this to rats. We've been poisoning rats for years and years. We still have rats.
Sure.
The pigs are going to be the same way. For the folks that are worried about pigs completely disappearing from the landscape, in my opinion, that's not going to happen. You're going to have concentrated efforts, I think, on farming operations, golf courses, and that sort of thing to keep the damage to a minimum. But there's still going to be pigs out there on the landscape for hunters.
Okay. Thank you, Glenn. This is really informative on the feral hog issue. I know that Field and Stream just picked up an article from, what was it?
The Louisiana Forestry Association wrote an article that they interviewed me and Dr. Pullman and some other folks for, and Field and Stream ran it, and we've got a lot of feedback, some positive, some negative, but we have received some feedback, and I guess it depends on what side of the fence you're on, because in Louisiana, the amount of damage that these pigs do to farming operations is outrageous. I mean, Sean Tanger did some work, and that's probably 6 or 7 years ago. They said it cost Louisiana almost $75 to $100 million a year due to feral swine impacts.
Geesh, that's huge impacts for Louisiana. Well, thank you, Glenn. We're going to go on to Dr. Diaz over here, who's going to talk to us about giant salvinia and rosocane scale. And Glenn, I'm going to take you off for a little while, but if there's more questions, y'all feel free to ask, and we'll pop Glenn back up. So Dr. Diaz, we just ran a contest for you yesterday on the AgCenter's page for the giant salvinia weevil. Can you just tell us about giant salvinia and what are the impacts in Louisiana?
Yes, so giant salvinia is by far the worst aquatic weed in the state of Louisiana. So if you have a map of Louisiana, there's reports of salvinia almost in every parish. And what this fern does is basically blocks waterways and lakes and ponds. So imagine for the sportsman paradise, which is Louisiana, imagine these ponds we cannot go and fish, use for recreational uses, as you see in the pictures. So imagine that instead of in the top of the water, you have these mats of floating salvinia, and sometimes in the summer they could be, 3 feet deep. So it's tremendous. As you can imagine, when you don't have the sunlight reaching the water, all the submerged vegetation that fish and other dogs need, that is gone. So it's pretty impressive. And if you stand in front of a lake infested with salvinia, it's mind blowing to think precisely, how to manage and all the ecosystem services of that lake that is disrupted.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you do research-wise to help with management of this? Because it seems like a massive problem.
Yeah, exactly. So, there are several management options for giant salvinia, including herbicides, mechanical control, and what I do is biological control, which is actually the use of natural enemies of these plants, right? But it's very important to highlight that these insects only feed on giant salvinia, and they are not going to harm other species. So here's the salvinia weevil. So we have been using this biocontrol agent that also comes from the native range of salvinia in Brazil. And our goal is to improve the job of the weevil. And that includes, understanding how to release the weevil in a pond. In the picture that you have on your left, it shows, a person releasing salvinia with weevils. Okay. So one very interesting question is, well, should we put in a single spot the weevils, or maybe we can release the weevil in several locations of the pond to maximize the spread and colonization? So that's the one line of research that we're doing.
Okay. And here, let me get up another picture here. There we go.
Oh, yes. So that's, some images of, something else that we do is the weevil comes from Brazil, which is a tropical country. So imagine that this weevil, when it's released in Louisiana, struggles in the center and the north of the state. Think about Cross Lake, Lake Vistano, for example. So one area of research in my lab is to improve the cold.
Hang on, guys. I think we're getting a little interruption. Yep, we're getting a little interruption right now. So, hey, Glenn?
Yes.
We lost him for a second.
Okay.
So let's go back and talk about feral hogs a little bit while we wait on them.
Well, one thing that you said was Dr. Kaller was going to talk about carp, correct?
He was going to talk about carp.
Well, one of the interesting things that we've actually done, I told you that the base of our bait is fish. And we started with bass, and we moved to pogie. But we've actually, we had a gentleman at one of our field days asked, why can't we use carp in our bait for pigs? And we tested that, and that will work. So we possibly could use one invasive species to control another. If it comes to that. The problem that we have is right now is actually finding a commercial source of carp to use in our baits, but we did do that.
Man, that's interesting. Okay, thanks, Glenn. All right, our Wi-Fi is back on, guys. We'll come back to Dr. Diaz.
Awesome. So what I was telling you guys is, we have this area of research where we're looking for ways to improve the cold tolerance of this weevil. So actually we need to travel to, for example, and look for populations in Argentina or Uruguay that actually have some more cold tolerance traits in such a way that they can handle better the winters in the center and north of Louisiana. So we have a population that looks really promising that we may be able to use in the center and the north. Something really important is to understand that the weevil is just one tool, and we're working actually with Dr. Chris Mudge to try to merge, for example, herbicides and weevils in such a way that, for example, that we can select specific areas to use with herbicides and leave an area for the weevil in such a way that they can still, our stakeholders can reduce the cost and be able to use both technologies. So the entire area, what we may call this integrated plant management,
Yeah.
is actually the merging of putting herbicides and weevils to work together.
Okay. So y'all, Weebles are currently being used for the public, correct? Like across the state?
Yeah, so in the AgCenter, we mass produce this weevil for the public and also state agencies in Louisiana. So we have an active rearing program, and you can reach out to the LSU AgCenter.com/giant salvinia, and you will have plenty of information how to obtain these weevils. But yes, we have this harvest coming out perhaps in May and June, where the public can receive these weevils and put them in their properties and to help with the control of giant salvinia.
Okay, that's fantastic. So the public can actually request this too.
Yes.
Okay. We have a question again from Lily. Will there be a future concern of the weevil itself becoming an invasive species?
There's something that's a good question, and that ties that the weevil needs salvinia. We know that definitely they cannot be jumping to other species, for example. And remember, salvinia is a fern, and which is very interesting is they have this close adaptation, and if you put a weevil, for example, in lettuce, tomato, corn, they will escape because they recognize that the nutrients they can definitely not obtain from these other plants. So they are highly specific, and they only feed on salvinia. So it's unlikely that they can be an invasive species on their own.
Does the weevil have natural predators in Louisiana?
That's a great question. One that we have is some data showing that fire ants, for example, when you get rid of fire ants in an area with giant salvinia, weevil numbers increase. So that's some data showing that perhaps fire ants may be preying on the weevil. But I don't have direct evidence like seeing a fire ant preying on the weevil, but there is some evidence of the population reduction.
Okay, that's interesting. And can you show those really? Because we were running a contest.
Oh, yes. So I really enjoy, I think in my dreams, I think this is the real size of the weevil. But anyway, we have these t-shirts available, and I appreciate everyone recognizing the job of biocontrol. So I have several of them, and you will be getting some of them through the mail. And for later contests, I'm going to have a salvinia weevil paint. Again, this is with our goals of promoting the program and the use of biocontrol.
Awesome. I'm actually going to type in the names of the 3 people who won, and we'll contact them through the AgCenter's Facebook page. But congratulations to Cheryl Skinner, Candy Melitello, and Art Scarborough on winning the Salvinia Weevil t-shirts. That's super cool, guys. This is illustrated by our own professor. So anyways, that was an exciting contest we did. Can we segue into carp? We have a question on carp. Dr. Kaller.
So, many aquatic fish have become invasive in a lot of different aquatic habitats around the world, and some, like this lionfish, get a lot of press because they're big and they're interesting. But here in Louisiana, these 2 fairly innocuous-looking fish, the silver carp and the big head carp, are causing a lot of problems. So we've had invasive carp in Louisiana since the 1980s, and beginning around 1983 through the early 2000s, they were showing up in commercial catches. But as Dr. Gentry pointed out, commercial harvesters aren't really interested in these fish. There's not a market for them. There aren't people interested in buying them. So these fish have proliferated. And starting about a decade ago, we began to get a lot of reports from the public, particularly recreational users, that silver carp were jumping and they were disturbing people who were water skiing and fishing and just enjoying their waterfront properties. So we joined a multi-university project funded by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to target control, because just like Dr. Gentry suggested, we're not going to eradicate these fish. We're going to control the populations. We're going to reduce the nuisance to commercial harvesters and to recreational users by focusing our efforts. Rather than go statewide and apply control methodologies, we're going to focus. So the 2 prongs of the research are which areas are native fish showing impacts. We can let the native fish tell us are the carp's presence affecting us by looking at the growth and the condition of the native fish? And we're also going to look at DNA methodology. As these fish are swimming through the water, they're sloughing off mucus and scales, they're passing waste. All of that leaves a DNA signature. Mm-hmm. So our partners at Southeastern Louisiana University they're specialists in this. They're going to do a lot of that work for us. Here at the Ag Center, we do eDNA work as well, mostly for threatened and endangered species work, but our folks at Southeastern are going to help us with that. And together, we're going to let the native fish tell us where the concentrations of invasive fish are and use the DNA to tie that all together to focus management efforts. Potentially finding a market, for this fish. Other partners in this project are looking at using silver carp, primarily silver carp, as a fertilizer ingredient.
Okay.
That could be primarily for the idea of promoting coastal plant restoration. Remember that indigenous people in many parts of this country used to bury fish and then put their seeds on top of the fish. The idea is bury the carp and then put the coastal plant on top as a great nitrogen and calcium source.
Okay.
So it's a fun project because there's so many different partners and we're attacking it from different ways with the idea of getting these populations back down to where they were in the 80s and 90s, where they weren't in everyone's face as a nuisance species. But we do need to be realistic. They've been here a long time and they're not going to go away.
That's the sad thing. And Robin was asking a good question: what can be done about the Asian carp in our rivers for our future young fishermen? They're highly dangerous to anybody riding the boat, which we know. I've gotten hit in the face by one. It's fun.
Yeah, so we're not going to be able to apply a lot of fish toxicants in this because they would affect too many non-target species.
Sure. But
there are effective ways to apply nets. There are certain types of nets hoop nets that they're very vulnerable to, as well as the state and here at the Ag Center, we have a methodology where we set nets and drive the fish in using our electrofishing boats, the ones we use to non-lethally sample. The whole point of electrofishing is to be non-lethal, but we use these boats to push the fish into nets to more effectively capture them. There's potential that could then be leveraged into a commercial market or into this coastal restoration outcome. The fish, these carp are not easy to prepare. It's not like a lot of our native fish where it's very easy to skin them and fry them and enjoy them all the different ways we enjoy them. The silver carp in particular have a lot of preparation. You have to drain the blood, use a lot of bones to deal with. So, we don't envision being able to go to your local restaurant and getting a delicious broiled silver carp. It's going to be incorporated into something else. Okay. But that would be a good way to create that removal of carp from these systems, because I thoroughly agree. I've been working in fisheries for 20 years in this state. In the first decade, I hardly saw these fish. Mostly I would talk to commercial fishermen and they would share their stories. But in the last second 10 years, we are encountering them more frequently, and they are hazardous and at worst nuisance at least.
Okay. And that's I do have a question for all of y'all. Let me put Glenn back on the screen here. There we go. Just in general, why are there so many invasive species in Louisiana? Is it a good climate for a lot of things to live, or how did things get here? It's National Invasive Species Awareness Week, so people are like, what is an invasive species? Why are there so many in Louisiana?
I think the answer is yes to all of those things. They had to get here, right? So whether it's carp or giant salvinia or hydrilla, they were all brought here, often unintentionally, often for a different purpose. And especially the carp, they were brought here for exploring aquaculture options for commercial purposes. And then they got loose because that's what fish do. Fish disperse. It is instinctive to them. Yeah. Glenn, I used to hear a phrase that feral hog moved very well at 55 miles an hour.
That's correct, and that's one of the things that's caused our problem today. Pigs are not native to North America. They were brought over starting in the 1500s, and explorers used them as food sources. But for years and years and years, they were a non-issue. I read an article off of the Farm Bureau news thing this morning where arrested a couple of folks in Pitkin that were transporting feral hogs from one parish to another and then releasing them for hunting purposes. And that's part of the problem. That's part of the reason we're in the problem that we are now, is people were moving them from spot to spot for hunting purposes. And with their reproductive rate, it doesn't take long for them to overwhelm a particular environment.
Oh, sorry, Dr. Diaz.
No, that's fine. I would just like to mention that we have the Mississippi River that goes through our state, and we have several ports of entry. And we know that ports are usually a main way that some of these invasive species arrive. We have the Port of New Orleans, for example, several ports along the coast too. So that makes I would mention that the hydrology of the state, we have a lot of connectivity of our waterways. So just thinking about aquatic invasive species, it's like a fantastic scenario for dispersal. So that's a quick comment on that.
And our climate is very similar to Southeast Asia. And so organisms that develop in Southeast Asia or certain parts of South America, our climate is a really good match. And so if they did well there, they're going to do well here. But the feral hogs do well everywhere. I mean, from the Ural Mountains all the way to Southeast Asia, through Europe into North America, they are survivors. So, for them, it was just a matter of being brought, and then they would be fine.
That sounds about right. Where can people go to learn about, invasive species management in Louisiana? Because I know we have some pretty good resources on our website and things like that, but what do y'all recommend?
Well, in terms of aquatics, the LSU AgCenter, and thanks to you, Anna, in fact, kudos to you for promoting the aquatic weed program, and the AgCenter is a great resource. And then if the public is interested, for example, in mapping, participating in citizen science project, iNaturalist is a good way to kind of bring people to documenting where invasive species are. So definitely there's many resources that perhaps is more oriented per organism. For example, for fish, USGS has a fantastic source of information. So it's definitely perhaps organism oriented. I don't know, Mike, what has been.
I'm going to be old fashioned and tell you your local public library has access to almost everything. As scientists, we put our research out to the world, but one of the main ways we do that is through the library system. So many of you, I've had many members of the public complain, well, I tried to find this and it was hidden behind a paywall. Ask your library. They can probably get it for you. Also ask the researcher. We are very happy to provide, you can contact us. We can send you things. Most of the things we have are going to be PDFs. We're going to email them to you. We do have paper copies of things, but it's much easier for us to just drop you a reply with a PDF and share the information. We did it for you. So I know it sounds old fashioned by saying the library, but that's still a great place to get things.
It is. And I mean, I agree with you. And I'm like, guys, go to your library, see if they can get it to you for free, and also contact our researchers. They're not scary people, I promise. They're real people and doing awesome work. And we have another question. I'm not sure if you guys can answer this one, but she's asking if anyone does research on Japanese climbing fern.
We don't in Louisiana, but I know that there is in Florida, for example, Lygodium is the genus of Japanese climbing fern. So yes, the USDA, ARS in Fort Lauderdale, for example, they do active research with biocontrol of climbing ferns, and also folks on Gainesville, University of Florida, they do have some papers on herbicide control. So yes, there is definitely information available about management option for Japanese climbing fern.
Thank y'all. Do y'all have any last minute things you want to add in? I'm like, we're hitting our 30 minutes, but I appreciate you guys for coming on and just kind of explaining it.
So, people are a big part of the problem and the solution. So we encourage you to become educated, advocate for good methods, and don't be part of the problem yourself. Just last year we had a piranha in the LSU lakes. It didn't walk there. So and I got an email about another invasive fish in another, I can't say where yet in Baton Rouge, but it'll be in the newspaper soon.
Oh.
Someone put it there. So don't be part of the problem. Please be part of the solution.
I think that's a really good point. I'm doing, guys, I'm getting my master's right now on aquatic invasive species, and water hyacinth and other aquarium plants, they're dumped into waterways sometimes, and that's how they're released. So don't be part of the problem. Don't dump your plants that you don't know what they are. Don't buy them in the first place if you don't know what they are either. That's a big deal. And we have a question. Do you see Dr. Kaller on the screen there? I'm not sure if you could maybe answer that one. Uh-oh.
Oh, it's about exporting transgenic diseases or transgenic genes. It was more work than it was worth.
Well, Kelly, there's your answer. It was more work than it was worth.
It was tremendous work. Yeah.
So, anyways, guys, but don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution and research it. Just go online if that's what you can do. Go online and Google it. Google through the AgCenter, though, and see what you can find through us, what kind of research we've done, and just learn about it. LDWF, Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, puts out a lot of good information on invasives as well, because they do a lot of management work. So let's see. Patricia asked, are regulations coming for federal limits on invasive plants, etc.? Ooh.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think the easiest way to say it is that in many ways although these are things that transmit among states, a lot of the way that our policies are structured, these decisions are left to states. But yes, it would be nice to have a nationwide policy on invasive species and the transport across state lines. Some things are already covered by the Lacey Act, which covers the interstate transport of wildlife, but there's a lot of loopholes. The aquarium trade is you can order many things you shouldn't be able to order through the aquarium trade.
Don't do it, guys.
Yeah, don't do it.
Just, yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you. Happy National Invasive Species Awareness Week. And we'll let everybody get back to their research. But thank you guys for being on today. And thank y'all for watching and coming and asking great questions for our researchers. Have a good day.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.